The Met Gala, was that appropriate in the middle of singing "We Are the Worlds" for the Ukraine? Your thoughts?
You know what? Nothing surprises me with the fucking Met Gala. The Met
Nothing
Gala's job
surprises
is to
me.
get your attention.
Right. And it got it. The Gilded Age was the theme this year. I saw some of the outfits. Everybody looked really nice. Does it make sense for us as in Americans, to be discussing our outrage over the Ukrainian war and then at the same time hosting the Academy Awards and the Met Gala at the same time? Is it in poor taste? Is it just what we do? Life goes on. What are your thoughts?
I think this is what we do. We oh, this is a current thing that people are concerned about. So we're going to say we support the current thing or whatever, and then go back to what we were doing because we don't actually care. It's performative. It's what we do.
Oh, this country sure can't stop singing and dancing, huh? I mean, no matter what, you can't stop us. So there has been a war between Russia and the Ukraine going on 2 months now. Once they are able to encircle the entire region, they will have completely dominated them. So far, I think that they are just in the eastern region for the most part. The Ukraine has been getting a tremendous amount of support from America and its allies. Finland is now considering joining NATO. This puts Sweden and Switzerland in very interesting positions because these are countries that tend to remain neutral in times like these. But I don't believe Putin will allow for ambivalence. What are your thoughts on what's going on?
I think Putin is so fucking powerful. He's got such a handle on the power in Russia that the idea that there's some kind of attrition point with him is ridiculous. There's no point at which the Russian people will stand up and actually be able to dethrone Putin. And I say throne because the guy is effectively a king. He is president for life. Whoever he deems to be his successor will also be president for life. They might have a revolution on their hands if they're not as much of a strongman as him. But Putin is totally fine with mowing down 1,000 people in the streets if they show up to demand he,
Yeah, they've found holes filled with hundreds and hundreds of bodies. I mean, this guy's not kidding around. He has visions of a reunified Soviet Union. He has always believed that the Ukraine is the heartland of it all. That's the heartbeat of it all. It has a third of the most military powers in Europe and in the world, I believe. It has a tremendous food source. It is strategically located. I mean, there's a million reasons to want to take over the Ukraine. And Putin, more importantly, culturally, does not co-sign what's going on with the West. And the Ukraine tends to lean a little bit more towards Western culture than I think he'd like. So this is not a crazy person. I mean, I've been comparing mainstream news to more international news sources. And it's so interesting how on American news, I hear so much more about how everybody thinks he's so crazy. He's so crazy. And the international news are like, this man is far from crazy. He's calculated. He's thoughtful. He has planned for these things. He knew there'd be sanctions. He knew that the things that countries are putting in place would happen. So he's planned for all this. Whether or not there is an ability to remove him from his position of power seems to be the only way to inhibit his ability to take over the Ukraine at this point. I mean, do you think they're going to win? I mean, what's a win, really?
Whether or not everybody else just wants to get involved. I don't think they can win straight up. I think they can drag it out to the point where he's like, he wants to, maybe back away. But at the same time, the idea that like the Russian economy is going to tank and then he'll back away. He doesn't give a fuck about the economy going down because he'll kill as many people as he wants to remain in power. And so, and also the propaganda machine within Russia and the authoritarianism within Russia is so vast and rampant that Putin isn't even getting adequate news back to him, which is why they've epically fucked up so bad, because the news of their fuck ups isn't even getting back to him. Because when you create a propaganda machine and everyone understands you can only send good news up the chain of command, then Putin, I'm sure, thinks they're winning this war right now when they're not, or they're not performing as well as they think they are. And also they were nowhere near as prepared as they must have believed that they were. And on top of that, what I've been reading is that the generals are telling the Russian army to move. They're pressing them to move and take Kiev and gain progress so they can tell that to the boss.
Mm-hmm.
To the point where they are the same booby traps that the Ukrainians are leaving for them because they're forced to just charge in there. Do you think the U.S. should start bombing or get involved violently? Let's say boots on the ground for the next question. But should we physically assert ourselves there?
Well, it depends on whether or not you're approaching that answer from a moral standpoint, an ethical standpoint, a capitalist standpoint. I mean, from a personal standpoint, I don't want to see any American soldier die. This is not a war that involves us. This is a war that involves Russia and the Ukraine. So does America need to physically put American bodies there? There's an argument for yes. There's an argument for no.
What if it's just drones, as a hypothetical?
But then you're basically slapping Putin with a white glove and challenging him to a duel. I mean, he has no choice to retaliate. Right now, we've ignited a war because America is going to call upon its allies to approach the situation first, obviously, because there are some of the countries that our allies are in closer proximity. I mean, do we want a war? I mean, we're on the brink of a recession, according to the economists, right? 2023 is not looking good. The feds have raised the interest rates. So they said the housing market has cooled suddenly after very hot market for the last year and a half, particularly since COVID and everybody ran out of the city like wet rats. So I don't know. Do we have an obligation to get involved in a war on the other side of Earth? I don't know. The military complex probably wants to get involved because it's a money-making machine, and the show must go on. We are on the brink of inflation, according to the economists, as I was saying, and I think people are still working through COVID. I mean, COVID is not over yet. So to take on a war in the midst of all this seems like we're biting off a bit more than we can chew. But I mean, the planet has lost its mind as a whole.